How's it going? And welcome to episode 211 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, joined as always by Kevin Hastings. Thank you all for listening or watching. We've got a great show lined for you. As always, we will break down any and every option we can find on the wire for your Faab consideration going into the sixth. I always lose track of these, Kevin. The sixth Fab period of the 2025 season. Before we get into all of that, it's always good to check in with you. Haven't spoken to you all week. How you doing, Kevin?
Oh, I'm doing great, Adam. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, it's been a fun week. I was telling you, I was running a few minutes late. Had to watch Lucas
Yep.
Erceg close it down for the Royals there in the ninth. Before hopping on here, it's nice to see the Royals string a few wins together. Finally, they've been in a pretty good slump, but we got your Red Sox coming up next week, I believe,
Yeah.
for a series.
That'll
So
that'll be
we
that'll
we
be
we
a good
might
one.
not go an entire week without touching base this week.
I think that's probably safe to say. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Royals after it was that the first doubleheader of the year, the one that they just played with Colorado, or I feel like it was the first doubleheader, or at least one that was due to a rainout. It was just nice to see a doubleheader go, especially in my daily moves leagues. Always fun to be able to like try to find any and all hitters that you can stream that happen to be playing in a doubleheader. Even if it is, the Royals and the Rockies, always it's fun combination to do. What came out of that doubleheader, not very fun. With Cole Reagan's only going 3 innings and then leaving because of a groin injury. We don't even have that on the news because I don't think either one of us wants to like think about it. But it really also doesn't really impact too much. We don't know that much. We don't know how much time he's going to miss. Actually, you might. You might know more than me, but that was unpleasant. Not to mention that he obviously also gave up a few runs and only went 3 innings, so it doesn't help your ERA in any sense.
Yeah, his command wasn't there for the outing, and so I think that led to it. I think this was very precautionary. They said some groin tightness, I think is what they said. I fully expect him to make both starts in his two-step this coming week. Doesn't affect Fab. He's rostered
Yeah,
everywhere,
exactly.
but I think if you do roster him, I think you can be safe. It was just a bad day.
Yeah, just a bad day. All right, well, let's get right into the news then, because there's a lot of it. And a couple of these things came about during the weekend between our record. We record these now on Friday evenings, so just about all or most of the Friday games have finished up by the time we're done recording. But obviously, some things can happen on Saturday and Sunday. One of those things that we missed last week was the uh, uh, Terso Ornelas coming up for the Padres, being called up from AAA and making his debut over the weekend. He did make his debut before Sunday, so he was eligible. I was happy to have him in a couple waterfall bids and get him onto the rosters at not too high of a price. And maybe it's because he kind of went under the radar a little bit, made his debut as a pinch hitter, and did not start in that first game, but obviously has had a couple of starts throughout the course of the week. Where he is available still, how interested are you, considering that the Padres are beat up right now, and so there's an obvious reason why Ornelas has come up. Can he do enough to actually hold on to a job that makes him worth bidding a decent amount of money for?
Well, I'm still not so sure about the playing time. So this is going to be something to monitor over the weekend. For those of you listening Sunday morning, we'll know a little more. We'll know if he's in the lineup Sunday. We'll know what has happened Saturday. 3 of the 4 games since his recall, he's been in that starting lineup, but only 7 plate appearances. So he's being pinch hit for. But the walk rates are great throughout his minor league career and what little bit we have seen at the major league level. He's only got 7 plate appearances, but the walk rate's great. The strikeout rate projections have him in the low 20s, just slightly higher than what we've seen through most of his time in the minor league. So if the playing time is there in this lineup, yeah, I'm definitely interested. I want to see a little more. Playing 3 out of the 4 of the first games, I'm not too worried about that. It was his second game that he had the night off.
Mhm.
I'm actually more worried about only 7 plate appearances when he's made 3 starts. This is what I really want to watch. If they're getting him out of the getting him out of the game as soon as he has to face a lefty, I'm probably not going to be very interested. Many of our large side platoon guys at least stay in the game for a lefty,
Right.
maybe not in the ninth, maybe not late in the game, but they don't get pulled so quickly that we're only getting 7 plate appearances in 3 starts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the San Diego is a little beat up at the moment with all these guys in the lineup hitting or still on the IL or just recently hitting the IL. Jason Hayward injury, basically the catalyst for Ornelas being called up to begin with. But between Luis Arias also joining them on the IL, Jackson Merrill still on the IL, Jake Cronenworth being on the IL for about 2 weeks now. There's still plenty of opportunity for him to show what he can do and kind of force the hand of the Padres. But if the Padres aren't going to give him that opportunity to actually do it, then it's a pretty clear sign that it may not be long for the lineup once these guys are healthy and back in their regular positions.
Yeah, I didn't put him in the rundown for later in the show when we're talking categories, but the guy that's getting playing time versus righties in this lineup, not available in 15s but in 12s, is Gavin Sheets. If you're looking for power in 12 team and shallower leagues, Gavin Sheets is playing versus every righty.
Yeah. And being close to, and when he is playing, as you can see here, if you're
Right there in the
watching the
cleanup spot, yeah. Or
top
even he's
third
been
of the
hitting
order.
second many of those games.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, slightly less RBI opportunity there, but a lot more plate appearances, and hopefully
Yep.
at bats. One guy who did make he made his debut after Faab, so he is readily available or should be in most of your leagues. Is catcher? We talked about Guerrero over in Chicago, but down in Miami, they call up Augustine Ramirez, who was part of the Jazz Chisholm trade last year, basically Miami's top prospect, and now in the majors in what I expect or suspect to be a full-time role, at least as far as catchers go. What have you seen so far this week, and do you expect this to be a pretty strong bidding season for those who are in need of at least a second catcher?
Yeah, absolutely. This is somebody that I think a lot of dynasty players have been
Mhm.
had their eye on for a while. He hasn't had the fanfare that a lot of prospects have, but we're talking about a catcher that can steal 20 plus bases and has actually done that as recently as 2024 in the minor leagues. That's exciting. He also has the power. He was 25 home runs, 22 stolen bases in 126 games last year, splitting time with the Yankee organization and the Marlins organization. Most of that, well, yeah, most over half, but quite a bit of it at Double A when he was still at the Yankees, but then a majority of it at Triple A. Once again, like we were just talking with Ornelas, we're looking at great walk rates, low strikeout rates. Projections still have him in the low 20s, slightly higher than what he has shown us in the minors. We would expect that. But this is a guy, Casey Bubba has been talking him up for a couple of weeks, even before the call. He's been saying this week since he got the call that he would play him over Austin Wells for uh, just a comparative right there.
Mm.
That he thinks if he gets the majority of the at bats, I think the number he used was 80% the rest of the season for the Marlins, which he very well could, that he would be a top 10 catcher the rest of the way. So even single catcher shower leagues, this is a pickup. He's going to be expensive this weekend.
Yeah, especially at that position. We keep
because we've
saying
had some injuries at catcher. So
we keep saying how deep catcher position has become, or at least during the offseason, going into draft season, you feel really confident about how many of those catchers fit into your 500 plus plate appearance bubble. It was definitely double digits, right? 10 or 12 different
yep,
catchers that you had an option for, but with all the like any other position, once the injury bug starts hitting it, that starts dwindling down a lot. But you know what? Those plate appearances are still there. And it's nice to see that Ramirez came out swinging right away, at least by Miami, putting him right into the catcher position 2 days in a row. And now today, he was starting at DH in the cleanup spot for the Marlins. Maybe at the behest of moving my boy Matt Mervis down a little bit into the lineup, but nice to see Ramirez, also getting not only full time, like top catcher on the team playing time, but also maybe even being able to supplement a couple extra at bats here or there at the DH position as well.
absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll move on to another call up here. The one that a lot of people have been itching for all season in this very young season. We're not even out of April yet. And that is Nick Kurtz being called up by the A's. Going to be playing, moving from one AAA stadium to another, but playing at the major league level in West Sacramento. He gets called up. A whole bunch of moves were made. So this wasn't like a 1-for-1, but we should also mention, the other call up that the A's made earlier this season has been sent down. Max Muncy of the A's has been optioned as well. It was part of the same day's worth of moves, but the A's made a lot of moves on that day. But Nick Kurtz, eligible in most places at first base. Probably also going to be, having plenty of time at the DH position as well for the A's. This is, somebody he had a great spring. He's been tearing up the AAA to start this season. He's been knocking on the door. Lo and behold, we get to that extra year of control time period. They wait a couple extra days and they call him up. You expect this to be his only call up ever? Or do you think Kurtz could? He's still pretty young. Can he stumble out of the gate and then get sent back down and then kind of go back and forth? What are your expectations for Kurtz here?
No, I believe this will be that he's here to stay. I believe that. Uh, we have seen, um, Spencer Torkelson, perfect example. Great college bat, came out. We saw him pretty quickly, started off slow, and then had that amazing second half in 2023. We thought he was off and running, and then we had 2024 Spencer Torkelson.
Yeah.
It does, fortunately, look like he's back. And so that's always a possibility. But yeah, like most people, I think Nick Kurtz is here to stay. The power is for real. And he is, we saw some pretty crazy bidding in NFBC formats, at least last week. And we're going to have it again this week because Nick Kurtz is definitely going to cost triple digits. And in most leagues, at least 15 teamers, I don't think a triple digit that starts with a 1 will get him for you.
Oh man. Yeah. I was definitely in on the Simpson bidding last week in most of my leagues, but I only got him in like maybe only one spot where I actually had put bids in.
I was in the 120s everywhere and didn't get him at
Not even
all.
close. Not even close.
Yep.
Yeah, I only got him in Glarf, and that was with like a 180 bid. And that was and only reason I even went that high was because all of the Earth leagues. Shout out to David Mann. He really pushed this. Our bids are at midnight Eastern. The deadline is midnight Eastern instead of 10 o'clock Eastern. And so you get a preview. You get a preview of what the bids are going to be in the main events in TGFBI and all these other leagues across
And
across
a lot of
NFBC.
our opponents in these Earth leagues we play with in other leagues, so we even can look at
Yeah,
exactly what they were bidding on a player.
if they want them, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wasn't coming close to winning them in any of the bids that closed early, but I'm like, all right. So I threw a couple extra, threw out a couple extra bucks that and I still didn't expect to win it. But I think everybody in that league was just, they're really smart. So it's like, all right,
Yes.
we'll see what we're gonna do here. And I'm happy to get them because it makes up for my winning bid of Zach Veen, which we'll get to in a second. The like 2 weeks prior to that, and I won him in that same league, and that's not turning out to be a very positive one. So I need all those stolen bases that I thought I was going to get out of Veen to come out of Simpson. But
The
Kurtz is going to be the same thing.
one drawback to this move is those of us hoping that Brent Rooker will get outfield eligibility. That's going to be on hold for a while. Soderstrom has moved to left field
Mhm.
all 3 games since Nick Kurtz has been there playing first base, and Brent Rooker in that DH spot where we thought we would see him most of the time, but many of us were hoping would
Yes.
just get to 10, maybe early mid-May, get to 10 games in the outfield. I don't see that happening probably till around the All-Star break, if at all now.
Yeah. Yeah. Rooker only ended up with the what, three? Yeah, 3 games in the outfield so far this season. So still need 7 more at least for this season. We'll see how long that takes. All right, we moving on to the aforementioned Zach Veen being optioned by the Rockies down to AAA. At the same time, the Rockies are without Ezekiel Tovar, who got placed on the 10-day IL with a hip injury of his own. So this, outfield and infield now looking a little bit different as they lose 2 of their younger, ultimately prospects. Maybe star is too strong of a word, at least even in Tovar's case. What are you looking at as far as both the infield and the outfield in Colorado? How it's looking now and how you expect it to look in the near future?
I think a couple of things. One, at least versus righties, and on Friday versus a lefty, Adele Amador is playing second base every day, or typically versus righties. He's even there versus a lefty
Mhm.
on Friday. So that's encouraging. We may see more plate appearances from him. Aaron Schunk, I had to look him up. I didn't know who Aaron Schunk was, to be completely honest, but
You don't.
he's
Yep.
played 5 straight games at shortstop for Colorado, and we're probably going to see that for a little bit. So a little bit of interest there. In the outfield, I think one of the guys that we were excited about when he got the call last season had kind of mixed results and then didn't stick around. The Rockies were being the Rockies. Jordan Beck is playing every day
Mhm.
in left field. Had a couple home runs in the series against Kansas City, or I might not even noticed it. You look at his line, you see 3 home runs, and that's not all that impressive. But then you realize, well, he hasn't been playing full time until this past week, and 2 of them came this past week in his most recent series. So Jordan Beck probably deserves some attention here as well. Hunter Goodman, for those of us that are hoping he still has catcher eligibility next year,
Mhm.
is looking good because I thought we were going to see him more in a corner outfield spot, but he's been catcher slash DH, and I think he's already at 7 or 8 games at catcher this season. So we're looking for that 20 for him to be catcher eligible next season. And Colorado faced a lot of lefties this week, so we didn't see him as much as we might going forward. But there were times last season when Nick Martini was very valuable to fantasy teams. And when he has played for Colorado, he's been either in the middle of the order or near the top. So when they start facing more righties, I think we're going to see Nick Martini more often as well. Colorado as a team, absolutely horrible. I've been seeing posts. Can they be worse than the White Sox were in 2024? And I think they
Possible.
still only have you know 6 wins or something like that. Ridiculous, right? On the season. But we know when it heats up in Colorado, we're going to be very interested in these guys when they're playing at home in Coors. And some of the guys that we've forgotten about, like Jordan Beck, because he didn't really get a full run and didn't always perform last season. Um, post type sleeper, right? That he's not going to cost us nearly as much this season as he cost us last year when everybody was excited about him.
Yeah, and after giving the day off to Brenton Doyle, who just came back from the bereavement leave himself, today, Friday against the lefty, it was nice to see Jordan Beck earn that top leadoff spot in Friday's game
Yeah.
as well. Hunter Goodman, by the way, with 11 starts at catcher throughout the course of the season, and he's the backup catcher. Like, there's nobody else on the roster right now besides
he'll get
Jacob
his
Stallings.
20 as long as they keep operating this way. Absolutely.
Oh, easy. So definitely already earned it for this year. Already had it going into this year, but nice to see if he has it for going into next year, and if he can just hold on to this everyday playing time, he'll earn a nice bump in his draft spot going into 2026 drafts. All right. Moving on, we've got a couple other pieces of the news outside of players being. Actually, no, the next thing we're going to talk about is somebody being options, but we're going to get to that right after this break. All right, as promised, we got a couple of other options to go. I kind of put these two together because maybe just because they both have a very similar first name. But I think that their roles for their teams are pretty much kind of similar in a way as well. Jake McCarthy was optioned to AAA by the Diamondbacks, while Pittsburgh Pirates sent down Jack Sawinski down to AAA Indianapolis. Neither one of these guys have been really there's a reason why they were optioned, right? Neither one of them were really making a big difference in their respective lineups, though they both have history of being able to do so. Do they leave enough of a vacuum in their respective lineups to be interested in whoever's going to be taking their place?
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona is very intriguing right now. There was a lot of us that were pretty excited about Pavin Smith coming into 2025 this offseason. We thought he may be the everyday first baseman. And then they signed Josh Naylor. And that blew that out the window. So we're like, oh, he's going to have to get his time in the outfield or at DH. Well, he's DHing most days and playing first base once in a while, giving Josh Naylor a break, and he's playing DH. Yes, Pavin Smith will typically sit versus lefties, but to see him playing nearly every day, that long stretch of righties up there on the graphic you just put up there for those following us on YouTube, he played 11 games that they played in a row versus right-handed starters, and he was in the starting lineup in that 3-hole every single one of them. Pavin Smith needs to be rostered everywhere. I think some people kind of were slow coming around to this. We accepted what happened when they signed Josh Naylor, but he's getting the playing time anyway. So that is huge for me. We'll talk about Tim Tawa a little bit more here later in the show. Alec Thomas really taking over the center field spot, especially versus righties, and then they'll let Barossa, who was just called up from AAA, it looks like is going to be, at least on Friday, is in there versus lefty. Of course, Randall Grichuk will get his at bats versus lefties, and that will spell either Pavin Smith or Josh Naylor on those days. Probably Pavin Smith, most of them. But yeah, this Arizona lineup is as good as advertised. What we carried over from what we saw last year when they were the highest scoring team in baseball. So any part of this lineup we can get, I am interested in, including a guy that we've given so many chances, and every time he seems to get it going, we see another injury, it seems like, and that's Alec Thomas. I'm still an Alec Thomas guy in Arizona as well.
Yeah, I'm appreciative that Alec Thomas has really come around. Alec Thomas, somebody that I've followed for a long time and been a big fan of, and wasn't a fan of the fact that I'm like, you're just not doing what you need to be, what you should be doing at this point. So nice to see not only getting the opportunity, but doing something with it as well. how about Pittsburgh? Any something tells me you're not as excited about the Pittsburgh lineup. You expect even without Jack Sawinski. Again, Jack Sawinski and Jake McCarthy both pretty much playing the same amount of time for their respective teams, which is to say, not very often. So not leaving a whole bunch of playing time on the table to take advantage of by somebody else. But is there anybody in Pittsburgh that has been or that can be doing it?
No, I don't think so. For the most part, the lineup, as you said, there wasn't a ton of playing time there.
Mhm.
It's not a lot different. But this does give us the opportunity to bring up Matt Gorski yesterday. 27 years old, almost 2,000 plate appearances in the minor leagues, gets called up, hits a home run in his first major league at bat.
Very nice.
Asked after the game about any tips that his manager in Indianapolis gave him. And you probably know that who that manager is. I don't,
Do not.
but since you're there, and he said, make sure you have a nice outfit. He said, I've been putting a nice outfit in my duffel bag every day for 2.5 years.
Very,
That is
very
amazing. I love it.
It is good to see something like that happen. It's just like finally get that
Absolutely.
and to make
I
that
don't
debut in that way.
I don't have any interest for my fantasy team,
No,
but I love baseball, man.
it's a good baseball story for sure. All right, well, on the opposite end, we got these guys going down. We got other guys coming back up, namely Jace Young over in Detroit, getting recalled from AAA and rejoining the Tigers. Does he jump right back into like an everyday role? What's your expectation for Young, and what kind of impact is it going to have on the rest of the lineup in Detroit?
I think we'll see exactly what we've seen in the 3 games since he's been back. I think versus righties, he's a starting third baseman hitting in the middle third of the order, and versus lefties, they're going to let Andy Ibanez, maybe even Zach McKinstry on occasion, although he plays much more outfield these days. Still list him as an infielder, but I think most of his playing time comes in the outfield these days. But yeah, Andy Ibanez will spell him versus most lefties, I believe. I I'm just not interested in Jace Young, and it this could be something I'm gonna miss out on, but I'm just not. I mean, it projected for, mid-20 strikeout rates, which isn't horrible, especially when you walk double digits, but there's just not a whole lot of counting stats there for a guy projected to hit around 220. Even if we, you know, double his projections to get him to around 500 plate appearances, he's still, just low double digit home runs and a couple of steals. And so in this lineup, I don't think that's going to cut it for me. It'd be different if he was a guy that was going to hit 270, but if you're going to hit 220, I need home runs or stolen bases.
Yeah, and if you and you need to be higher up in that lineup as well in order to get to those counting stats as he's batting at in the middle, the bottom of the middle slash bottom third of the order, batting sixth in his first 2 games back. But on top of that, not playing against lefties throughout the course of any given week, you're just not gonna get enough plate appearances to bring those volume stats up.
Right.
So I feel you on the lack of interest. You're like, maybe I should be, but I can't understand why I would be. All right. Well, I don't know. This doesn't really have much impact in Fab. You're still holding on to the guy, but Spencer Strider did go back on the 15-day IL with a hamstring injury while playing catch. It had supposedly nothing to do with his first outing coming back from the longer injury, the arm related injury. Uh, what are you doing with Spencer Strider, or does just his absence for a little bit have any more impact in more options in Atlanta that you might be interested in?
I was hoping that I might be more interested in AJ Smith-Shawver this week. It appears he'll get the two-step, and I think many of us are at this point where we don't automatically shy away from Colorado because Colorado's lineup is bad enough that sure they're going to score runs on occasion playing in that ballpark. But we're not just automatically shying away from Colorado. But when I look at the second start of that two-step being the Dodgers, I'm like, nah, that's probably not worth
Yeah.
the risk there. So I was hoping that I'd be interested there, but at least for this upcoming week, um, yeah, it's just
Sure.
a shame. At least it's not an arm thing, hamstring. Hopefully, we see Strider back sooner
In short
rather
order.
than later. For those of us that did stash him in a spot or two and were excited and only got one start out of him.
Yeah, Nick and Kyle Bland, obviously over at Pitcher List, they reran their offensive stat PLV stats in Colorado, both on the road and at home, turned out to be very streamable. So not being afraid of Colorado, at least until the weather really starts warming up.
Exactly.
So things can, they can spin on a dime once that air gets real thin and real hot. So they did just get snowed out recently, so it hasn't quite hit that mark yet. All right, well, moving on to things that might have a little bit more of an impact. Lane Thomas hits the 10-day IL with a bone bruise in his wrist. Don't like to see that. Any hitter injuring his wrist doesn't usually tend to clear up anytime soon, even if they come back from the IL right away. The Guardians call up infielder Will Wilson. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, for choosing the name Will for your name of your kid. Has a last name Wilson already. That is amazing. So what overall thoughts on Will Wilson and or anybody else that's going to take Lane Thomas's spot in Cleveland?
I once again, I don't have a whole lot of interest here. You know, I know minor league stats, especially when just looking at county stats without knowing the ballpark and the competition, and that can get us in trouble. But when I'm looking at somebody at 25 years old, 460 plate appearances, 5 home runs, 6 stolen bases in the minor leagues last year, I'm probably not that interested. Now, but he came into 2025, made the move to Cleveland organization, 6 home runs in only 18 games. So should I take note of this? You know, he had 18 back in 2023, great walk rates, lower strikeout rates, projected, mid 20s and, a decent walk rate. But the projections are not buying this 6 home runs in 79 plate appearances.
Sure.
The Zips projects him for 7 and 349 plate appearances. The others have him, for 1 and 50 some plate appearances. That's 10 and 500. So, yeah, once again, not a lot of interest here. I think the biggest thing for me is Nolan Jones is going to play versus righties, at least the way this lineup sits now. Yes, 66 plate appearances, and it has not been good, at least on the batting average side. And haven't seen much power at all. 0 home runs, but only slugging 250. But the on base percentage is there. So I think there is something to keep an eye on here. If you were interested in Nolan Jones a couple of years ago when we saw his breakout and then we were all disappointed in 2024, I would keep an eye on Nolan Jones because he is getting the playing time in the outfield, but I don't see anything actionable at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm really seeing just by looking at the lineup is, Angel Martinez was already playing every day, but now
Yep.
he's even more solidified himself in center field without the option of Lane Thomas. Unfortunately for Thomas in general, he just came back from being hurt, and then he goes and gets hit on the wrist. So hopefully he can come back in short enough order to, take over that job again, but we'll see how long that might take for Thomas. A couple more real quick. AJ Puck, he hits the IL for the Arizona Diamondbacks and is seeking multiple opinions after undergoing an MRI on his elbow. So never something you want to hear for a pitcher in general. And the fact that not only is he looking for a second opinion, he's looking for multiple opinions. It's like, I don't like your answer. I don't like your answer. I don't like your answer. Like, somebody give me an answer I want to hear. And I'm not optimistic that he's going to get the one he wants. AJ Puck, easy drop at this point, because who knows how long he's going to take to come back, even if he does come back this year. And Justin Martinez, obviously Justin Martinez dealing with like the worst possible time for him to get shoulder fatigue is like the day that AJ Puck goes on the IL, making Justin Martinez the everyday closer for the Diamondbacks. He still presumably is the closer for the Diamondbacks. He did come back recently. But overall, that situation in Arizona, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, we're going to talk about this later in the show. There are several situations similar to this in Major League Baseball right now. This time of year, when we start talking closers near the end of the show, it's usually like, maybe a spec here, maybe one there. There are multiple teams in a position similar to this where the guy that we believe to be the guy, we don't know if he's healthy or not. And we're not so sure who would be the guy if he's not, right? There's multiple options. Shelby Miller has been brought up. Jalen Beeks has pitched really well so far this season. Justin Martinez only threw 12 pitches on Wednesday, and then they tried to let Ryan Nelson get a 2-inning save, and he blew it on Thursday, throwing 54 pitches. If Justin Martinez was okay, he'd be in that game, in my opinion. And it's not like he threw 12 pitches and has been used a lot recently. He hadn't pitched in 5 days when he threw those 12 pitches. Something's up with Justin Martinez. You said the shoulder fatigue. I think this is going to turn into something, and we need to figure out who we think is going to be the closer for the Diamondbacks going forward. We've seen Dre Jameson get an opportunity recently, but I'm in the camp that it's Shelby Miller or Jalen Beeks, one of the two. I would spec on either one of them going forward.
Yeah, Rick Graham's got Jalen Beeks next in line behind Justin Martinez. But to your point, yeah, Dre Jameson, Shelby Miller, even Ryan Thompson right there. At least when you're playing in holds leagues, they're getting all the holds there as well. So, and those who know also are waiting for Kevin Ginkel to rear his head back into the situation as well.
And he's on rehab assignment already, I believe, or we're about to start it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's knocking at the door.
Throws another name in there, and he got a lot of the opportunities when we saw Paul Sewald struggle or hit the IL over the past couple of seasons. So 100%. But so far this season, Jalen Beeks in 15 innings pitched has 15 strikeouts, a 0.60 ERA, and a 0.73 WHIP. So he might get more opportunities than the others.
It's the very rare occurrence where you are happy that the ERA and WHIP are that close.
Yes, exactly. When they're both under 1, that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I keep holding my hat on as far as Justin Martinez goes is that it's only going to be, for me, it's only injury that keeps him out of that position, especially since
I believe so. Yeah,
he just got paid. And obviously arbitration is not a thing. So something to keep in mind there. So if he's not at the end of games with AJ Puck not in the picture, there's definitely a health issue, even if they're not coming out right and saying so. All right. Kumar Rocker, he hits the IL for the Texas Rangers with a right shoulder impingement. The Rangers have had a couple of different, I wouldn't say interesting, it's not the right word, but they've had their spring training there was definitely a battle for that 5th and or 6th spot in the rotation. And now with Rocker opening that up, it does seem like they need as much help as they can get. I mean, they brought in Patrick Corbin, and he's still around, and so this obviously solidifies Corbin sticking around for quite quite a while longer. What expectations do you have with the Rangers rotation moving forward with Rocker not being part of it?
Well, they're going to get Jack Leiter back on Sunday. So they still have a 5-man rotation if you do include Patrick Corbin, who sets up for a 2-step this week, both
Perfect.
at home. Seattle, who is mid-pack with a 692 OPS versus lefties. You knew I was going to look to see who Patrick Corbin was facing this
Well,
week.
of course.
And the Athletics, who versus lefties, 4th in baseball with a 788 OPS. Yep. Unfortunately, even I'm not using Patrick Corbin this week.
Even yeah, it's
But
also.
I think the rotation's set if Leiter does indeed return on Sunday.
I would also just like to say I love being in a world in which we are afraid to stream against the A's. It's a good, as somebody who lived in Oakland for a long time. I'm happy to see that. Willie Castro going over to Minnesota. Willie Castro hits the IL with a oblique strain. Just staying in Minnesota has nothing to do with Willie Castro, but they also lose a member of their rotation as they send David Festa down to AAA after another start where he just couldn't get out of the 5th inning or couldn't get past the 4th inning at this point. Willie Castro to the IL. It just seems like it's par for the course for the Twins, losing another infielder, having an injury issue with their lineup. What kind of opening does we were just talking about Willie Castro is going to play more often due to the other injuries in this lineup, and now he opens up the door for who?
Yeah, well, it's intriguing. If you look at the Minnesota Twins page on roster resource, you can't figure out where Willie Castro was playing, right? If you just look at the past week, right? One lefty, so sure, Christian Vasquez was in there at catcher, Jonah Bride in there at third base. The rest of the week was all righties, and other than giving Bader a day and Ryan Jeffers a day off for the week, the lineup has been steady, and we've talked about this for a couple of seasons now. Minnesota pretty set on what they're doing versus righties versus lefties. Willie Castro was so great because he could move around to all these different
Just
positions
the glue.
and
Yeah.
gave them coverage so they could move all even more guys around. So I think this stabilizes their lineup a little bit. I think we can count on who we're going to see versus righties, who we're going to see versus lefties. Maybe not as much pinch hitting late in games, so a few more at bats for everybody. But as a team, they've been horrible. Like Harrison Bader and the healthy Byron Buxton. That's been great. And even Buxton, doesn't have the average, but he's out there stealing bases, hitting a little power like we like to see. But yeah, the lineup just has not been good. For as late as he was drafted or picked up off the waiver wire, Ty France has been okay. But unfortunately, even though the lineup has become more stable, they have to start performing before I have much more interest.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. You'll know more about it by the time you listen to this. But Luke Keeschel did get pulled from his game today as well after getting hit in the hand. He stayed in to run the bases, but he did not come back out to bat the next time his spot was up in the lineup, as he has been the DH pretty much every day since he got the call up, only starting twice at second base. So we'll kind of see what that does as far as opening up DH time, or hopefully not. Hopefully he's fine and he just, continues to hit.
Yeah, we talked about him last week. I don't think we expected 5 stolen bases out of him in his first 6 games. That was great to see. So hopefully he's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Last thing here, another guy who was obviously not on your Faab radar, but may open up some opportunity for somebody out there. Corey Seager shockingly hits the IL with a hamstring strain. Actually, I feel like we didn't get to say that. We haven't said that about Corey Seager in quite some time. It used to be just an ongoing thing where Corey Seager was obviously going to get hurt at some point, but he's been pretty stable. But he hits the IL now for the Rangers. What kind of openings do you see in the middle infield for the Rangers with Corey Seager being out?
Well, not only is he playing shortstop versus righties, he's leading off versus righties. That's Josh Smith. If he's available in any format, I would grab him. We're probably going to see Nick Ahmed versus lefties, but versus righties, Josh Smith, and the fact that he's leading off versus all the righties they face can make up for sitting a couple of days versus
Yep,
lefties, just
sure.
getting the more plate appearances when he is playing.
Yeah, Josh Smith is the Willie Castro of the Rangers, right? Like he's somebody who's going to be able to go in there and fill in a bunch of positions, and even better for him, he can bat leadoff against righties. That's gonna make all the difference. All right, well, that I think sums up everything we need to talk about when it comes to the news and notes. We're going to get to some recommendations, but we're going to do that after this quick break. All right, we are back. Thank you so much for continuing to listen to us here at On the Wire. We just went through a whole bunch of news and notes, call-ups, send downs, injuries, of course, unfortunately. Takes up most of our time. And there was a whole bunch more things that we didn't even mention. Of course, you should be listening to the First Pitch podcast with Jake Crumpler and Trevor Huth every single day. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy leagues. Of course, all things starting pitching. Nick Pollock had you covered over at the Plus Pitch podcast, where he reviews every single start from the previous day's games and gives his take as to what you should do with that information moving forward. So listen to both of those right here at the Pitcher List Podcast Network or on their individual show feeds as well. You can find them in either spot. But with all that and anything else, Kevin, we need to spend some more money. I mean, I've gotten to a point where I need to slow down, but there are others out there that need to spend some money. The low hanging fruit is there for power. We talked about them already with Nick Kurtz, but talk to me a little bit more about what will you be spent. All right. Well, I don't want you to give anything away in your leagues, but will you be surprised to see Nick Kurtz? Actually, you know what? This came up. This came up earlier in the chat, so I'll use this as the example. I think it was Frank. I'm scrolling through. Frank asked who was going to have higher Faab bids, Nick Kurtz or Augustin Ramirez, the catcher in Miami. Obviously, different positions. And Kurtz probably more of a true power threat. But you're going to talk about Kurtz anyway in the power category. So why don't we answer Frank's question first? Which one do you expect to see higher bids on in your average 12 or 15 team leagues?
I think the bids will be higher on Kurtz. People have been excited about him ever since draft day. And the I don't mind telling people I'm going to be in the same spot I was with Simpson last week. Yeah, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, but it's not going to be enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll go triple digits, but they're still going to start with a one.
One.
So I doubt I end up with him anywhere. I am going to be a little more aggressive, I think, on Tim Tawa in Arizona. Yes, he's hitting at the bottom of the order, but this is a guy that hit 31 home runs last year in 142 games between AAA and AA. Nice walk rates, low strikeout rates, as we said. Now projections have him drifting back up into the mid 20s. If you're getting a hit for power, I don't mind a 24-25% strikeout rate. rate or so that he's projected for. And already 4 home runs in 45 plate appearances at the major league level after having 3 in just 26 plate appearances. So he's often running with 7 home runs in 70 plate appearances, basically, with double-digit walk rates and a 20% strikeout rate at the major league level. Yeah, he's at the bottom of the order, but it's a lineup that does turn over. And so I'm going to be pretty aggressive with my bids on Tawa for Arizona for power this week. He's available almost everywhere.
I obviously the question will revolve around how long does he keep that position. But the thing is that Kettle Marte is not close. Like he's not coming
Exactly.
back tomorrow. Um, it's not a expectation that I would have Tawa for the rest of the season, as opposed to Kurtz, who obviously, as we just talked about, we would expect him to be, the starting first baseman or playing every day throughout the 2025 season for the A's. But at the same time, you worry about the now, worry about the later.
And those of us excited about Jordan Lawler, if Tawa's hitting, we're not going to see Jordan
Sorry,
Lawler
Jordan.
for a while. But I'll take advantage of what we can get out of Tim Tawa in the meantime.
At the moment, sure, of course. All right. Well, all the big bids last week went to Chandler Simpson in the speed category and just in general. But there's got to be other options out there still, Kevin. So if we're looking for some speed, stolen bases, and of course runs scored, that was actually the nice bonus for Simpson, is that he is leading off a good chunk of the time against right-handed pitching. So obviously more opportunities to get on base, more opportunities to steal, but of course can actually add to that other category as well, making him a 3 category guy instead of just a 2 category guy with batting average and stolen bases. Throw in some runs in there as well. Who else is out there that you have your eye on if you didn't win Simpson last week?
A couple of guys pretty heavily rostered, or very heavily rostered in 15s, but available in 2/3 or more of 12-team leagues. One where we're going to see Dalton Varsho soon, maybe even this weekend. I don't think we've seen an official announcement yet as we're recording on Friday, but it is possible we will see him versus the Yankees this weekend. And then Noelve Marte, who we talked a little bit about last week, and he was added in most 15-team leagues. A couple of them out there, he's still available, but he's available in over 60% of 12s. And we talked about last week, we talked about just not ever knowing how guys are going to recover after a PED suspension,
Sure.
right? That was kind of our worry. Plus, we'd never seen him really perform well at the major league level. What we have seen so far in 2025 is what we expected out of Noelve Marte in 2023. And if he's going to take off, uh, we know he has the tools. Listening to Wins Above Fantasy, Stephen Van, we're talking about Noelve Marte, that he is their topic this week was um, guys off to hot starts and can we believe it? And they're all over Noelve Marte. I am as well. Obviously, you brought it up. I added him in a spot last week, and in the 12-team leagues where he's still available, I'll try to add him this week.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, love to see Dalton Varsho make his way back. We're almost confident that he was gonna actually make the opening day roster. Obviously, they just needed to extend that a little bit longer, but glad to see him moving in that direction. Uh, Moving on to the last hitting category here in the opportunity section. We got quite a few teams that have a 7-game work week ahead of them: Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, the Athletics, Texas, the Mets, Washington, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Colorado. 2 teams do have the short week of 5 games, and that includes Seattle and San Diego. Teams where their stadiums play a bigger difference than others. In one way or the other. Colorado will be at home for 3 against Atlanta. So you get Atlanta bats in Colorado, and then there'll be Colorado Rocky Road in San Francisco of all places for 4 over the weekend. Cincinnati will be at home in Great America Small Park against the Cardinals, and they will be at home all week, finishing it off against the Nationals. Tampa Bay host your Royals before heading off into the other Yankee Stadium as they play in Steinbrenner Field for the first half, and then go to Yankee Stadium for 3 over the weekend. And the Athletics are away from West Sacramento all week as they head to Texas and head to Miami. So nobody taking advantage of that ballpark. So with all that and everything else, Kevin, who has a good opportunity ahead of themselves, whether it be schedule matchups or just finding themselves into the lineup a little bit more often?
Yeah, with the Zach Geloff injury and Max Muncy being sent back to the minors, Luis Urias is the everyday second baseman for the Athletics. And I think it's real easy to forget when guys were really good, but maybe not great a while ago, and then we haven't seen him for a little bit, but he's still 28 years old. And, in 2021, we saw 23 home runs and 5 stolen bases, over 75 RBI and runs while hitting in that 250 range. He's hitting 258 so far this season, couple of home runs. He was in the trade for Trent Grisham. I don't know if you remember. Trent Grisham made a horrible error in right field for Milwaukee,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that very next offseason, he was one of Milwaukee's top prospects. They traded him for Luis Urias, who had been in San Diego, just because he had to get out of town. They weren't
And
keeping him on the
they didn't
roster off
wait
that
very
error
long.
in the postseason.
That
Yeah,
trade happened
they made that
early in the
trade.
offseason.
Right. And we haven't seen much of Luis Urias since then either, but he was a good player hitting that 240, 250 range, 20-ish home runs, handful of stolen bases. If he's the everyday second baseman for this Athletics team that is scoring a lot of runs, especially when they're playing at home in West Sacramento, they are on the road this coming week. But this is when I grab a guy like Luis Urias for a middle infield spot, even in a 12-team league. He's going to be solid, a batting average that shouldn't hurt you too much, and pile on some counting stats, even hitting at the bottom of that order. They're turning it over.
Love that. I just love finding that name. You're like, oh, I feel like I had him everywhere at one point, and now he's nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, great. A lot of hitters to consider in a lot of different categories. Take notes there, and we'll get into the pitchers right after this. All right, Kevin. We gotta get some pitchers on the books. I feel as though, even though you had a long list last week, streaming has already become more and more difficult to do,
Oh, yeah.
especially on the starter side. Like, I find myself holding on to more high end relievers in my lineups instead of taking the chance. I just don't trust a lot of the chances. So I haven't been streaming in most of my leagues a lot, especially in my 15 teamers. I have not been streaming a whole lot, but there's always going to be something out there, somebody who randomly gets a good matchup. And so tell me, at least going into this week, who I should be considering.
Yeah. And a lot of those guys last week, I brought them up, but I said I'd
Sure.
try not to use them. Right. So I didn't bring all those guys up this week. A couple of guys that are highly rostered in 15s, but a lot of availability in 12s. Brian Bayo for your Red Sox. He gets Minnesota this week. We talked about that offense. They scored some runs in a game or two, including I think here on Friday. I think they've had a good offensive game if I remember correctly. But yeah, Minnesota does not scare me, especially with a guy like Brian Bayo. JP Sears, 100% rostered in the main event, but only 32% in online championships. He had a nice outing this past week, and he has a 2-step at Texas. I will sweat through that to get the at Miami. And Texas has been up and down. He could have 2 nice starts for us this week. JT Ginn is in the same spot, nearly 100% rostered in 15s and even more rostered in 12s, but available in over a third of them. He gets that same 2-step. Didn't have a great outing earlier this week, but to get that start at Miami. I'd be willing to sweat through the start at Texas for a guy that we had seen pitch better in his couple of previous outings to the one this week. Lance McCullers Jr. gets a very nice landing spot for his projected return next weekend at the White Sox. Unfortunately, he won't be available to us in Faab in FBC formats because I don't think we've seen him. We won't see him prior to Sunday. But that'll be a nice landing spot in all other formats where he will be available on the waiver wire. That he might have been drafted in some spots. He is 32% rostered in 15. So check. He might have been drafted in your league and dropped in NFBC. So definitely worth checking. Tyler Anderson as a lefty at Seattle. So the right-handed batters that would typically do damage versus a lefty have to deal with that glare. So and he wasn't the greatest start this week, but I think a quality start, kind of I think pretty much what we're hoping for when we send Tyler Anderson out there. But yeah, a lefty pitching at Seattle, I'm interested. There are a couple of others that I did not put down on the sheet. Still attacking the White Sox. I know I made the comment the Rockies might make a run at that loss record from last season, but Chad Patrick from Milwaukee gets a start at the White Sox this week. I haven't had a chance to see how he's doing here on Friday. Chad Patrick was getting to start Friday evening. I'll try to grab that real quick. But I like him this week. And then there's Justin Verlander. If there's a time this season that we're going to want to use him, it's going to be Rocky. You mentioned it, Rocky Road in San Francisco, of all places. So Justin Verlander, he's available out there, especially in 12s. This might be the best opportunity to use him all season.
Verlander under the hood is actually looked pretty good. It's the actual lines that matter to us in fantasy that have not been it's the whole process over results type of mentality for Verlander. Chad Patrick went 4 1/3 earlier today with just 2 strikeouts. Looks like about 2 earned runs and quite a more than 4 or 5 base runners. So not a great outing for him. It's the whole 2 first name thing.
St. Louis has been really good. So I that's good enough versus what St. Louis has been doing for me to use him at Chicago.
Yeah. Also great. And you led this off by saying, and you kind of closed it out with talking about Tyler Anderson. Like, also know what your expectations are for these guys that you're picking up. It's like any of these streams in most scenarios, you're not bringing them in with an expectation of like, great, I'm bidding on these guys. They're going to go 6, 7 strong innings. We're going to get double-digit strikeouts out of them. Nobody's going to let up a run. It's like, no, you know what you're chasing with these. It's like based on the matchups, based on what they actually have done in the past. Tyler Anderson, you're not expecting a ton of strikeouts, but that could go up just because of the fact that he's in Seattle and going up against the Mariners, their win chance does increase, but you're not expecting him to just all of a sudden turn into an ace because of this one stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Uncle Ted brings up Joe Boyle, and I'm a huge Joe Boyle guy, and I have held him in the couple of spots that I had him in redraft leagues, and I'm trying to hold him a little longer, but we're gonna have to see him back in the rotation before long.
I thought after the 6 innings, I was going to bring him up in wild card, so it's fine. You bring him up now. But like after the 6th no-hit innings where the Durham Bulls ended up combining for the no-hitter because of Boyle's start there, I did expect that to happen sooner rather than later. But yeah, lo and behold, hey, maybe it happens by the time everybody's listening to this. But I don't know that he has pitched since that either. So I know they're obviously they pulled him. It's a AAA game. I don't think he even cared that much about getting a no hitter at the AAA level. So he didn't mind getting pulled there, but they're obviously, doing what they can to keep him, going strong and healthy and watching his pitch count throughout. Now let's move into the ratios category, which is, the category you worry about with Joe Boyle until he can, fully, get your trust back with getting those walks under control. So who makes the list this week? And this list will grow as we get closer to the end of the weekend and we start seeing what the usage is for some of these guys over the weekend and who's primed for more innings. But going into it, at least right now, who do you have your eye on in the ratios category?
Yeah, one guy I'm gonna add, all the usual suspects, and as I've said, a great spot to start for this is Rick Graham's save plus hold rankings, because the guys that aren't closers are available, at least have some availability in our leagues, and that it makes it a real nice starting point. If he has him ranked highly as a reliever in saves plus holds leagues, but they're not getting the saves and they're available for us. And I'm going to go look at that usage that you just brought up and be very interested in those guys. But one name I want to mention specifically, going back to Milwaukee, is Craig Yoho, and he he had a not so great outing, or a couple of them. I mean, they haven't been horrible. He's only given up one run, but he's only got 2 starts. But he was tearing it up in the minor leagues. Amazing ratios, right? So right now his line doesn't look that great because he's only pitched 2 innings and he gave up a run and he had a couple of walks. I think he's going to settle down and he's someone I'd be very interested in to protect my ratios. And Milwaukee is one of those teams 4 seasons ago when it was Brent Suter we were talking about every week. The Brewers just seem like one of those teams that relievers snag wins for. So I think Craig Yoho is a guy that could fall into that category for us. Protect, maybe even help out our ratios, get us our handful of strikeouts, and maybe snag us some wins as well.
I like. I mean, if nothing else, I like Yoho just due to the name. It's just it's a good name, and sooner or later he'll do something good. He'll have to get a Yoo-hoo shower, and it would just be appropriate, right? But
The tweets I saw, yes.
what I worry about, like with the really high end pitching prospect relievers, is just having them come up and not seeing them be used as often as I would hope or expect them to be used. So that's the only thing I worry. And like, obviously Milwaukee can prove me wrong very, very quickly. But I think maybe I was just, tarnished a little bit by all the kind words that Bochy gave to Mark Church during spring training. And then he was not used at all by the Rangers. And then obviously has been demoted ever, more recently. So I do worry about that with any reliever that's coming up that's not going to get, the timeshare to actually make an impact. But there's no denying what Yoho has done. And it is unfortunate that he doesn't give up any earned runs in the minors in his first outing at the major league level. He, of course, gives up an earned run right away. So glad to get that one out of the way. And just not have to worry about it in the future because it's going to happen. So that's the way I'll spin it. It's like you just got it out of the way. That's all.
Yeah, another one of those guys we don't mind that the ERA and WHIP are so close together. In over 57 innings last season in the minors, a 0.94 ERA, 48 appearances, and a 0.86 WHIP. And then, like you said, hadn't given up a run in 8 appearances at AAA so far this season. He has given up that 1 run in his 2 appearances at the major league level, but I expect him to settle down and show us what we saw at AAA last season and to start this season.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame him for making his debut and then, having a little bit of nerves and just, gotta get it off your back, get it out of the way, and then just keep rolling. All right. Well, we need other relievers, Kevin, that are going to actually give us saves. We talked a lot about the Arizona situation as well. A lot of options. We didn't really talk about it, but Edwin Diaz was pulled from one of his games recently with a hip thing, and he has not been back since. I was hoping that he would make his appearance into today's game against the Nationals. He did not, even though they probably could have used him, as the Mets did come back and take the lead, and then just to lose it again in the ninth. But what other situation? I mean, you don't even have anybody here on your list from the Mets, but if there is an issue in New York with Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter is the name, but he's also the only high leverage lefty that they have
Lefty,
in that bullpen.
right?
There
So
are other
Reed Garrett,
lefties. There's one other lefty, but nobody at the same level as Minter. So not anybody that they're going to use later in games. They did use Ryan Stanek at the end of the game, as well, as he was the one with he got the blown save and the loss ultimately, even though Minter was the one that was in the game last. It was his runners, Stanek's runners, that ended up scoring. Yeah, I mean, is there a name to actually care about if Diaz is? I mean, there's always going to be a name you should care about, especially somebody that's going to get saves. Who's the name that you'd be eyeing?
I I think with these situations, Arizona is similar. Unless I have a really good reason that I think I know who the guy is going to be, I want the guy that's the least expensive, right? So
Sure.
you put them all in your waterfall and you take the one that you get, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of money on any of these guys because they all of these guys probably get a save or two the rest of the year, but we're trying to find the guy that's going to get us 20, right? So yeah, Ryan Stanek, AJ Minter, Reed Garrett, all of those guys I'm putting in for the same amount, and hopefully I end up with one of them.
That's fair. I mean, of course, there are exceptions to that whole lefty concern that I had, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Tanner Scott's beyond his meltdown recently,
Will
or
Smith
his
for a few years. Yeah,
yeah. There are definitely Chapman taking the bulk of the saves in Boston right now. So it definitely can happen. It's a little bit more of a stable relationship with the closer role when there's another lefty right behind you that you can use as an option earlier on in the seventh or eighth inning because of those matchups. So AJ Minter is probably still the name that I trust the most based on his track record for the Mets situation, but we don't know what's happening with Edwin Diaz yet anyway. So we'll see. Hopefully, we get a little bit more clearer news by the time bidding comes around on Sunday. What other situations do you have your eye on, Kevin, in the saves category?
yeah, and they're similar. In San Francisco, it looks like Camilo Doval is performing, but then he had another hiccup,
Yeah.
right? It really looked like it was absolutely definite he was taking back the closer role for San Francisco. Had a little hiccup on Thursday, so we'll see where this goes. But he's definitely worth the spec. Once again, Casey Bubba, San Francisco Giants fan, has said all offseason that the Giants want Doval to get that spot back. So he's going to be given the opportunity if he is performing. We'll see how they react to the hiccup on Thursday. Luke Weaver, uh, you know, Yankees having similar issues as the Mets. Maybe we're seeing some hiccups there from Devin Williams in New York. Are we going to see Luke Weaver get the spot back that he had last season? You know, in the offseason, I said I couldn't see the Yankees going into the season with Luke Weaver as their closer. They did go out and spend money to get a closer, but they have Luke Weaver who performed for them last season, so they're in a good spot. He's 97% rostered in 15s in the main event, but 76% in 12s. But he's worth grabbing right now. Porter Hodge, Ryan Presley has been getting the saves, getting the results, but they have been what I like to call heart attack saves, almost every one of them. Runners on base, full counts with everybody that comes to the plate. And now he's having a knee issue, which has bothered him in the past. He has missed time for it in the past. I believe he actually had it drained on Monday, and we haven't seen him pitch since. Porter Hodge is only 49% rostered in main events and 40% in online championships. I think Porter Hodge is who I would bid the most money on. because I think this is imminent that he is going to become the guy, whether Presley just continues to underperform or is actually injured. Um, and Uncle Ted brought up Will Vest. Absolutely. I have him on the list. 37% rostered in 15s, only 2% in 12s. I think this is a share. I believe AJ Hinch, he's told us this all along, but I do think that Will Vest and Conley are going to, between the two of them, get most of Detroit's saves. So either of those guys in my lineup, I'd be fine with. I think you're
And
on
a
mute.
lot of the guys that you expect to be part of that mix in Detroit are either injured, Bo Brisky, or
Right.
still in the minors, Jason Foley. And so Will Vest kind of making a name for himself, or at least putting himself at the top of the heap there as well. Probably worth mentioning only because this was a fear I had coming out of Cleveland, like going into Cleveland, and Emmanuel Clase having a little bit of a not a hiccup per se, but some hiccups, and whether or not that was due to fatigue and just being driven into the ground for 3 seasons in a row by the Guardians, pitching as many innings as he has. Cade Smith still, I mean, obviously somebody that's going to be useful in non-save categories as well. Seems like a pretty good stash at the moment as the main guy that would take over that role if something were to actually
That's
come.
another situation where I'd go with the less expensive guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Dave McDonald has been saying for a couple of weeks that he thinks it would be Hunter Gaddis, and Hunter Gaddis has just as good a resume as Cade Smith right now over what they've both done over the past season plus in that bullpen. So yeah, I think Cade Smith is going to be a popular ad this week. Grab Hunter Gaddis for single digits if you can.
Yeah, I mean, remember, it's not, especially in these situations too. We've actually heard this about Ryan Walker last year, where it seemed pretty obvious that he should be the guy that would take over at the closer position mid-season at one point. But they said that, you know what, we like what Walker's doing. We like his where he's at in the lineup, or in the the hierarchy. In that seventh, eighth inning role, he does more damage there. We don't need to move him into the ninth inning. That could be the same case for Cade Smith. He's been doing so well in that eighth inning, in that setup role for so long. Why ruin a good thing? Why not just give somebody else who also has some obvious high leverage inclinations in Hunter Gaddis to just kind of leapfrog them and keep these guys where they do their best stuff. So don't be surprised if that's the case in these situations. All right, Kevin, my favorite one. We already talked about Joe Boyle, whose name I was just going to kind of spit out there. Who else would be a wild card ad as we close? We get pretty close to closing out the month of April.
Yeah, I have a couple of guys that I'm hoping to get more news on rather quickly. And in leagues where I have a spot, they'll be at the bottom of my waterfalls, but I wouldn't be upset if this is who I end up with, even if I don't know when we're going to see them yet. Uh, Giancarlo Stanton was taking batting practice on the field this week. That's all I've heard. I haven't heard a timeline. I don't know what that
Sure.
means. But if he's taking batting practice on the field and he's a designated hitter, maybe it's not going to be too long before we see him. We saw it in spurts last season and the postseason when healthy. Giancarlo Stanton still hits the ball harder than anyone in baseball. So I'm interested on when he will return. And one that's even more up in the air is March 21st, I believe, is when Thairo Estrada went down with his injured wrist. We were told 4 to 8 weeks. It's been 5. I haven't seen anything since then when we were told 4 to 8 weeks 5 weeks ago. I did actually end up with him on one of my teams as a $1 bottom of my waterfall last week when I didn't get anybody else. I don't know how long I'll be holding him, but I do want to get some information. I'd rather add him for $1 now. I think he'll cost more than that if we know he's going to be back. And we talked about that Rockies lineup. They're running Kyle Farmer out there every day. We're seeing he was going to be the starting shortstop for Colorado this season. I'm worried about even if he is healthy,
Hmm.
that a wrist injury, you brought it up earlier in the show, that still concerns me. But I was really big on him coming into the season, so disappointed with the injury right before the season started. But I want to see what he can do once he comes back. And hopefully we hear something soon. Like I said, it's been 5 weeks. We were told 4 to 8. I expect it to be more towards the 8. And with it being a wrist, maybe a slow start when he comes back, but hopefully we can get some news soon. So that's a couple of guys. And I love the Joe Boyle that you and Uncle Ted both brought up. I've been stashing him since he got his appearance a couple of weeks ago. I have not dropped him.
Well, I'll give Eddie out here in the chat a little shout out as he let us know that Tyro Estrada actually was put on the 60-day IL by the Rockies earlier today. So we did get at least
Oh, just today.
yeah, probably while you were talking.
Yeah. So that means it'll be at least the end of May. So yeah, too early for that.
The extra shout out I will give Eddie out here is a name that I love because I was just looking at him the other day, and we talked about him last week as being somebody who struggled last year, obviously with injury, but didn't start off super strong with his first start in the minors this year. But that is Cade Horton is kind of turned it around in his next 3 starts. Going 4 innings, 5 innings, 4 2/3 in the next 3 starts after his 3 1/3. Not too great of a spot. Has only allowed 1 home run so far in all of those games. And in his last outing, going 4 2/3, only allowing 1 walk, 2 hits, and 5 strikeouts. Each one of these, he has struck out at least 5 for all of these outings. So Cade Horton, not saying he's going to be the next call up by the Cubs, but it is nice to see him working in the right direction as he continues to get stretched out and get further into games. And I would expect to see him in Chicago at some point this season, especially if he keeps this trend going. Love to see any of those wild cards kind of work themselves out at any point. Never mind this week, maybe at some point during the season. Kevin, it's been a stressful season already, and we're not even out of April
It
yet.
seems like it. Yeah.
But
it seems crazy that we, as of yesterday, we're only 4 weeks into the season.
exactly. With all the news, all the injuries, and I mean, this is par for the course. We know this to be true. But give me something else I can work with here as we head into the 6th Faab period of the season.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Eddie, Frank, and Uncle Ted in the chat tonight. They had a conversation going on amongst themselves and a couple of questions. Does Craig Yoho leapfrog Abner Uribe? Not in my opinion, if you're talking about ever getting a 9th inning opportunity, but for high level situations earlier in the game, he could be the first guy if a starter comes out in the 5th or 6th in a tie game, right? I think he could be what we saw Brent Suter do for them a few seasons ago when he ended up with double-digit wins on the year. That's what I'm looking at with the great ratios there and hoping for. There was a couple of other questions here that I did want to address. Do you think Chandler Simpson is the starter? This is from Eddie in center field for Tampa once the Rays are at full strength with DeLuca, Josh Lowe, Christopher Morel, Cameron Meisner, Jake Magnum. I don't think we're ever going to see that. So I think he is the starting center fielder. That's a lot of guys all banged up, a lot of guys that have a history of being banged up, and some of them with not so great histories of performance. So, yeah, I think we're going to see Chandler Simpson out there more days than not. Somebody said, why do I continue to roster Ryan McMahon? This time of year, when even the home field advantage at Coors is just the massive outfield. Later in the season, you will want to roster Ryan McMahon when Colorado is playing at home, at least. And so, yeah, great questions out there. Yep, Frank brought up Agustin Ramirez, as we did, about how high Casey Bubba is on him, and he does catchers for other publications out there, so he really dives into the catching position in the off season. So a lot of great comments and questions in the chat room tonight. I think, yeah, you said it perfectly, Adam. It really seems like this season has been more stressful than seasons past. For it still be, we have a almost a full week of April left,
Yep.
right? And there's so much going on. I think we kind of forget it is like this almost every season.
Yeah.
Right. Last year, we thought there was more injuries than ever till Jeff Zimmerman and some others started looking at stats and saying, "No, it's like this every year." Right. So just keep plugging away. Don't forget. I made one mistake last week, and I was really upset with myself because I had all of my Faab done Saturday night. And I absolutely reviewed it after the games on Sunday. But don't get complacent and think you shouldn't check on every single guy you have in your Faab list. That's my advice going forward. Because I was looking for guys that I thought might have got injured, this and that. I did not I did not look at the news on Brandon Young being sent back down.
Right.
And I probably still would have bid on him, but I would not have spent the money I spent on Brandon Young last week in the leagues where I got him. One of them a triple digit bid with a zero backup bid, right? Because people just took him off their list when he got sent back down. And now he's already back up making another start. I hope he sticks in the rotation. I made the comment. I think he could be the best pitcher in that rotation the
Yeah.
way it sits
Yep.
right now. But yeah, I should have drastically dropped my bid there. And I did go through and review things, an hour or so before Fab run, but didn't think I needed to look up anything on him because he'd pitched 2 or 3 days earlier. I knew he was healthy. So, yeah,
And
don't
that
forget to
rotation
double
didn't.
check
Yeah.
everything at the last minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Orioles rotation isn't exactly one that is lending itself to less opportunity for anybody who's actually going to perform. So it was a little bit of a surprise to see him get sent back down, but good to see him working his way back already.
Couple other questions here. I love that we have questions in the chat room tonight. Uncle Ted's asking if Jack Caglione is coming up in May. I still don't think we see him that early. I'm loosening on that because yesterday, Thursday, was the first time in his professional career he played in the outfield. He was playing right field for Northwest Arkansas. That is exciting as a Royals fan because that's how he would get into the lineup. Is that their outfield for 2 seasons now hasn't hit a lick. So the spot where they need offensive production is the outfield. If he can play right field, we might see him much sooner than I expected. So in May, that might still be pushing it. But if he can take that, if he can play defense in right field, we might see him sooner rather than later. And then rest of season, Eddie was asking Cam Smith or Chandler Simpson. He started off slow, but the more well-rounded player is Cam Smith, in my opinion. If it's only stolen bases you're after, stick with Simpson. If you want who could be a 5 category guy, Cam Smith is heating up, and I think this is a sell high, buy low opportunity if you're offered Cam Smith or Chandler Simpson, as Eddie is here in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Cam Smith got him in a couple places, and he was sitting on my bench for a while, but right back into my in my lineup this week, going into his nice little warming up streak. Hopefully, soon to be a true. Of course, I sat him as soon as he had the 2 home run game, and you miss out on that, but back in it now, so we'll hopefully be able to take in as much as possible after the fact. Excellent. Yes, I will echo all of Kevin's statements about all you guys out in the chat. Join us every single week. We are pretty consistent. I would say we're pretty consistent out here every Friday evening. We're usually getting on the air by around 9:45 Eastern time as we record for about an hour and a half. So you got plenty of time to come in, throw some questions in there. We might not get to it while you ask it, but I love this part, Kevin. You're like, hey, let's just go through it at the end of the show and get to all the things that we might have missed. If it makes sense in the conversation, yeah, we can tackle those questions in the middle of the show. But love the fact that we can just go through those at the end. So thank you guys all so much. And if you do come in here and ask a question, you don't get it answered, just listen to the show on Sunday morning. And we got you.
Hit us up on Discord if we didn't get to
Oh
something.
yes,
Either us or someone else. Several people will
jump
put
in there
their
for sure.
opinions out there. It's great. The Discord's amazing.
Never mind watching baseball on playback.tv/pitcher
So cool.
list. That's super cool. I
I
mean,
didn't get to do that much this week, unfortunately, but
I
hopefully
got
this next week I get to
I
do that
poked
more.
I poked in my head quite a few times. I'm more of a fly on the wall in those situations, especially if there's not somebody actually talking, which has been plenty, which is still great because there's still plenty of people talking in the chat. There's just not somebody on stage
Yes.
to like comment vocally. But you know what? It's just as good because you can just continue to bounce off of other people that are watching the same games as you. It's so fun. All right. Well, with all that and everything else, guys, thank you guys so much for listening. This is going to be it for episode 211 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hastings. Thanks for listening. We bid you goodbye.